صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Ibadah or acts of worship from head to toe, something that we need to take serious. This is to fulfill the purpose of our life. It's a serious matter. If we are created to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, that means we need to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with all that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us. He didn't give us what He gave subhanahu wa ta'ala for play, but He gave it to us for a great reason, and that is to establish the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we're looking into every organ, every part of our body, and how to fulfill the acts of worship using this organ and this part according to the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. We mentioned some examples, because to go through every single thing that we need to do, it takes a lot of times, but just taking some examples, making sure that we are aware of this fact, that we don't just look at anything, we don't just listen to anything, but to make sure that we filter out things, that we are aware, that we think, that we make decisions, that we seek knowledge from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, so that we see in the proper way, we hear in the proper way, and so on and so forth. One of which, when we talked about listening or the ears, it's amazing how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created our ears in such a way, perfectly shaped, so that it would help us to listen to anything that is around us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us 2 ears and 2 eyes and 1 mouth. And it's for the great wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we talked about the ears and what are the things to listen to, what are the things that is forbidden for us to listen to, and how to take the means to stay away from what is haram and to do what is halal. If we mention more examples when it comes to using the ears in the proper way, after listening to the Quran and staying away from what is haram, backbiting, listening to backbiting, listening to slandering, listening to musical instruments, and so on. One of the things that we need to do is the acts of worship. We use our ears in our acts of worship. For example, listening to the adhan. Listening to the adhan is such a wonderful thing. A great mean to achieve a lot of good deeds and to receive great rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that sometimes we ignore this act of worship, listening to the adhan. Many people in different parts of the world are deprived from this. That's why one of the benefits of being among the Muslims is that you would hear the adhan. When it's the time for the salah, you'll find the mu'adhin would raise his voice with the adhan. Muslims will drop everything, would leave everything that they are busy with, and they will be busy listening to the adhan, because it's meant, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to listen to the adhan when it's being called, and to say something as a result of listening to the adhan after the mu'adhin saying everything we say one after the other after him, as the Prophet ﷺ ordered us to do. That if you listen to the mu'adhin, say exactly the same way that he says. So if the mu'adhin says Allahu Akbar, you say Allahu Akbar. If he says Allahu Akbar, again you say the same thing. If he says Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, you say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. If he says Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, you say Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. If he says Hayya ala salah, which means come to the salah, you don't say Hayya ala salah, but instead you say La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, which means there is no might and power except by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because you need the power, you need the help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to establish the salah, to go to the masjid, to fulfill the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you are interacting with the adhan, and it's not just a sound that means you need to go to the salah. If it was just a sound, alert, something that is like an alarm to get people aware that this is the time for the salah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have made it bells, for example, like the Christians do, or a loud noise, right? And that's it, and everybody should be busy or getting ready for the salah. This is not the case. The adhan, the call for the prayer in Islam, has words to it, has meanings to it, so that we listen and we attentively listen to it, and as a result of that we say some things and our hearts are affected, and then we would do certain acts of worship, and then we would go to the masajid, and so on. Where is that in the life of the Muslims today? We won't find it in many places, but we need to bring back what has been forgotten. We need to revive the way of the Prophet ﷺ. How was the Medina at the time of the Prophet ﷺ when the adhan is being called? Do we think that the shops would still be selling and buying? Would we think that people would still continue to enjoy and to laugh and to talk and to continue their life? Or things would happen differently? Whenever they would hear the adhan, everything would stop and everything will get ready for what comes after the adhan, and that is the salah. To the extent of which, as one of the early generations of Islam, he used to do, which is Amr ibn Abdullah, that it was said about him that the people at his time, if a person would raise his hand as a carpenter or someone using a tool, for example, right, a hammer, that whenever he lifts his hand and then he hears the adhan, he won't continue and bring it back. He would just leave it to fall behind his back out of the respect of the adhan, that not even another move to be done. Not that the person would continue to work and continue, even abandoning the salah altogether. This is how when they exalted the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was pleased with them. That even their life was blessed. And this is something and a meaning that we need to establish in our life. You would never be taken away any of the goodness of this life from you if you would exalt the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You would never be deprived if you fulfill the 5 obligatory prayer in the most perfect way. Never. Why? Because there's a very strong relationship between salah and rizq and provisions. They don't leave one another. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, وَأْمُرْ أَهْلَكَ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَاصْطَبِرْ عَلَيْهَا لَا نَسْأَلُكَ رِزْقًا نَحْنُ نَرْزُقُكَ وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلتَّقْوَى. That order your family to establish the salah and be patient in your ordering them, and know for sure that we don't ask you for rizq, you will be provided for. Why provision? Why rizq is being mentioned here with the salah? Because the shaitan comes and whispers that if you stop what you're doing because of the adhan that you're supposed to listen to, if you stop what you're doing to go to the masjid, this can take away some of your provision, whether it's wealth, whether it's enjoyment, or whatever there is. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding us that your provisions will be given to you. Don't worry about your provisions. It will be even blessed for you if you would establish this act of worship. And even as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about Maryam, Mary, the mother of Isa, Jesus, the son of Mary, when the angels came to her, or Zakaria, فَنَدَتْهُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ وَهُوَ قَائِمٌ يُصَلِّي فِي الْمِحْرَابِ. That Zakaria, that the angels came to him and they called him while he is in the salah to give him the glad tidings of his son Yahya or John. When did they come to him? When he was in the salah. And the same thing for Maryam, Mary, the mother of Isa alayhi salam, that the provisions will come to her in the place of worship. There is a very strong relationship. So the issue of listening to the adhan is such an important act of worship for us to observe. And that's why, without exaggeration, if it's because you don't listen to the adhan, so you would move somewhere where you can listen to the adhan, this is a great intentions to do. For the children to be raised to listen to the adhan. Many of our children in different parts of the world, they don't have this bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They don't listen to the adhan. 5 times a day, you would listen to the tawheed and the call of Allah from the mu'adhin, the call that the Prophet ﷺ called the mu'adhin. This is all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to establish the tawheed, the oneness of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to interact with the adhan and to say the dhikr to be said after the adhan and to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and so on. So this is definitely a very important act of worship, a way to use our ears. Also, even in matters that are permissible. Talked about acts of worship, but even things that are permissible, things that a person would do on a daily basis. We use our ears, we listen and we hear to other people talking. This is something that we need to do it in the proper way. The issue between husband and wives, right? The husband needs to listen of what his wife is saying. And the same thing for the wife, she needs to listen to what the husband is saying. And if we go on and on from the life of the Prophet ﷺ, there are amazing stories. One of which, and we don't have the time to talk about this in details, but you can refer back and go to the book of Sahih Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah, in which he mentioned this hadith in details, in which the Prophet ﷺ listened to Aisha radiallahu anha in the famous hadith of Zara, the hadith of Zara, the mother of Zara. This is her kunya, this is her nickname, in which Aisha radiallahu anha, she talked with the Prophet ﷺ, and she told him about 10 women getting together, and each woman talking about her husband and the characteristics of her husband, right? And one of these 10 women was Zara, and although her husband divorced her, but she didn't say anything but good about him, right? Which shows the quality of this man. Usually when a woman is divorced from her husband, she would say bad things about him. But Zara, she said great things about him. So at the end, after Aisha radiallahu anha said all of this to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's a long hadith. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Aisha radiallahu anha, I was to you like Abu Zara to Zara, right? Making it in such a way that he would have this good talk and easy talk with one's wife. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is teaching us. But the point of the hadith is, as the ulama they say, it shows the quality of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the characteristics of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he listened. He listened to what Aisha radiallahu anha had to say, a long hadith, and he would give the time to listen while he is the most busiest person, alayhi salatu wassalam, busy with the affairs of the ummah and so on, but he would give the time to listen to what his wife would say, which is something that we need to do, something that is in the permissible way, something that we are missing in many of our homes, to listen and to be patient in listening, to listen from our children to what for them to say. The judge, for example, in the courtroom, he would listen to both parties and he would listen carefully to what do they have to say. And also when it comes to transactions and interactions with one another, and to make sure that we stay away from listening to something that is forbidden. Anything that is forbidden, we stay away from it. To make it easy and to sum what we mentioned about when it comes to the issue of hearing and listening, we need to make sure that every day comes, how am I going to save myself from the hellfire using my own ears to do that? Am I going to listen to Quran? Am I going to listen to what is good? Or a person is subjecting himself to the punishment of Allah, being busy with listening to what is haram, what is forbidden. Once we are aware of this and we take the matter serious, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would make ways easy for us. And one last thing to end this episode with, the beautiful hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he said, and we mentioned a part of it earlier before, that وَلَا يَزَالُ عَبْدِي يَتَقَرَّبُ إِلَيَّ بِالنَّوَافِلِ حَتَّى أُحِبَّهُ فإذا أحببته كنت سمعه الذي يسمع به وبصره الذي يبصر به ويده التي يبطش بها ورجله التي يمشي بها. This hadith, we'll mention it more than one time in the coming episodes, inshallah ta'ala, which basically means that if you want to protect your hearings and your sights and so on, if you are constantly doing the acts of worship in a consistent way, the option acts of worship, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide you so that you would only hear what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to hear, that He's pleased with. He would only make you see what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and so on. But we'll expand on that inshallah ta'ala in the coming episodes. But we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guard our ears and our eyes and to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
قل إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين. قل إن صلاتي ونسكي ومحياي ومماتي لله رب العالمين لا شريك له وبذلك